Chapter 18 of the Romance of Modern Engineering. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Rick Cordray. The Romance of Modern Engineering by Archibald Williams. Chapter 18. The Romance of Petroleum. Second to none in commercial importance is the commodity which, in its different forms, lights millions of homes when the sun goes down, sends locomotives spinning along the iron way, makes the motor car hum over our roads, supplies us with heat for cooking and many industries, lubricates millions of machines, has valuable medicinal properties, and touches our daily life at other points too numerous to mention here. Petroleum, or rock oil, has been known to mankind since the dawn of history. Herodotus has celebrated the naphtha springs of Zacynthus, Pliny those of Agrigentum. Many years later, Marco Polo quaintly wrote of Baku on the Caspian, "There is a fountain of great abundance, inasmuch as 100 shiploads might be taken from it at one time. This oil is not good for use with food, but it is good to burn, and it is also used to anoint camels that have the mange. People come from vast distances to fetch it, for in all countries there is no other oil like it." The last sentence, fortunately for mankind, is inaccurate, since petroleum is very widely distributed throughout the world. At present, the United States and the Caspian region are the greatest oil fields of the world, as regards the quantities extracted for human uses. But huge deposits exist in China, Siberia, Burma, Asia Minor, Canada, Mexico, Peru, waiting for their turn, and doubtless as the world is better known, fresh oil-bearing areas will be discovered. In Marco Polo's time, men, as we have seen, came vast distances to fetch petroleum. Today, petroleum comes thousands of miles to every country, town, village of the civilized world. It will be interesting to give some account of the engineering aspects of the system of supply, which circulates many millions of barrels of the useful fluid every year, with reference to the processes for raising and distilling petroleum. In this connection, we will confine our attention to the great oil areas of America and Russia, where the crude oil occupies innumerable cavities of the earth, ready to give up their treasures the moment the engineer has done his share of the work. The antecedents of petroleum have been much debated, whether they are of a chemical nature, and therefore connected with distillation that occurred while the earth was in the making, or are to be considered organic, resulting from the decomposition of vegetable and animal substances in far-off ages. In recent times the latter view has been much taken up by chemists. Further interest attaches to the question whether the supply of mineral oil is a fixed quantity, or whether it is still manufactured by nature in her subterranean laboratories. Should the former hypothesis be correct, we must regard the deposits of petroleum as vast storehouses which, when once emptied, will resemble a worked-out bed of coal. It has, however, been proved that petroleum occurs in geological formations of all periods from the Silurian to the Tertiary, though most abundant in these two, especially the Silurian, with which is closely connected the Carboniferous stratum of the Coal Age. The formation of large petroleum deposits is dependent on three conditions: the presence of a certain class of matter, converted into oil by the process of time, the porous stratum to contain the oil, and an impervious stratum above to prevent evaporation and displacement by water. When the oil is particularly well sealed in by superincumbent matter, the formation of gas subjects it to a great pressure, sometimes raising to 800 to 1,000 pounds per square inch, which proves itself, as we shall see, a valuable ally to the engineer. The petroleum industry may be said to date from the year 1859, when one Colonel Drake sank a well at Titusville in Pennsylvania, and struck oil, otherwise a fortune, in a spouter that emitted a copious supply of the crude material. A year later came the American Civil War, and not till that terrible conflict was over did American enterprise thoroughly rouse itself to exploit petroleum. Then followed scenes which can be paralleled only in the Californian and Australian gold rushes, for the eagerness with which men settled on virgin tracts, expended their all in the search for the hidden treasure, and if successful gathered about them towns which flourished a while and then fell into decay as the fields became exhausted. And like the gold miner, the oil prospector might suddenly stumble on riches or continue his search, hoping against hope, till beggary stared him in the face. Every year witnessed the opening of new territory: Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, California, Texas, Wyoming, Kansas. By 1900, the output had risen to 57,070,850 barrels, which multiplied by 40 gives the total in gallons. In 1901, the daily product was 156,182 barrels. Yet, in 1918, it was considered a mishap to stumble upon petroleum when sinking a brine well. Colonel Drake, the pioneer of the industry, drove an iron pipe 36 feet into the rock when boring for oil in the valley of Oil Creek, Pennsylvania. This device, necessary in many cases to hold back the water in overlying strata, is now generally adopted for the American wells. Having selected a likely spot, the prospector rears a derrick, or lofty wooden frame, 70 feet high, in form a truncated pyramid, resting on a foundation of heavy timbers, enclosing the space in which the well will be sunk. To one side of the derrick is a strong upright post, on which a stout timber, called the walking beam, works seesaw fashion, actuated by a steam engine at the one end, and at the other moving a rod connected with the boring tools. The latter, in American practice, are attached to a rope, which can be paid out as the depth increases, and quickly wound onto special reels when the tools have to be raised for renewal or replacement. The series of drilling apparatus, taken downwards from the walking beam, is as follows: 1. A temper screw, to which is fastened 2. The rope, 2,000 to 3,000 feet long. 3. The sinker bar, a solid rod of iron about 20 feet in length. 4. The jars, a pair of heavy links allowing about 13 inches of play, so that the sinker bar may not strike hard on the boring tools, but yet by its momentum on the upstroke loosen them when the links suddenly tighten. 5. The auger stem, to which is screwed the 6. Auger or center bit. The well sinker, having his tackle all ready, begins operations by passing the rope over a pulley at the top of the derrick and round one of the drums connected with the winding gear. The engine is then started, and the operator, by alternately slackening and tightening the rope, causes the bars and borer to fall and rise, taking great care that the first length of shaft shall be quite perpendicular. As soon as a sufficient depth has been reached, and while the auger is at the bottom of the shaft, he threads the rope through the temper bar on the free end of the walking beam. The rope is pulled up until the jars are in contact, and then lowered about 4 inches, and made firm in the temper bar. The walking beam has a stroke of 24 inches. The first stroke up does not move the auger from its work until the beam has risen 4 inches, when the jars pluck at the auger stem and raise it to 20 inches. On the downstroke, the sinker bar and top jar fall the full 24 inches, but the auger and stem and lower jar only 20 inches, plus the penetration of the fall. An attendant gives the temper screw a slight turn between every 2 strokes, so that the auger may continually change its transverse direction and be able to sink in without closing up the play of the jars. When the screws run out, the rope is unclamped, the screw wound back, and the adjustment made for a fresh attack, or if need be, the winding drums are put into action, the tools are drawn up, and the well cleared of sand or rock splinters by a peculiar form of shell auger. In this manner, a hole is sunk, 8 inches in diameter, to a depth where water is no longer encountered, and lined with a drive pipe. Through this, the boring continues to a point 300 to 400 feet below the surface, where an inner pipe, called the casing pipe, 5 1/8 inches across, also terminates. Again, smaller drills are used until oil is struck. A torpedo is then lowered into the well, 1 to 25 gallons of nitroglycerin, and fired by percussion. The explosion shatters the walls of the bottom of the shaft and releases the petroleum from the myriads of small cavities, besides splitting the stratum. Soon afterwards, the oil spurts from the mouth of the shaft, accompanied by fragments of the canisters that contain the explosives and a shower of pebbles. The next thing to do is to prepare the well for flowing. A 2-inch pipe, perforated at the bottom, is let down to the oil level, after being provided with a rubber packing to jam against the sides of the bore. The pressure of the imprisoned gas drives the oil up the pipe like soda water from a siphon. When its force has expended itself, a pump is inserted into the pipe, and the oil is lifted to the surface. On the Caspian shore, the greatest oil fields are those of the Absheron Peninsula, at the east end of the Caucasus. Its 1,200 square miles are saturated with petroleum like a sponge soaked in water. The geological foundation of the Caucasus dips under the Caspian and reappears on the farther side, its course being marked by gas bubbles, which have at times risen with sufficient violence to capsize boats, while the exuded oil is swept by gales into the harbor of Baku, where the careless throwing away of a match may set the Caspian on fire far and wide. The oil fields of Balachani, Sabuchny, Bibi Aibat, Romani, and Binagadi are covered thickly with derricks, differing in shape little from the American type. The Russian prospector uses both cables and rods to move his drills, but has a preference for rods. As the Baku oil fields do not hold so much gas under compression as those of Pennsylvania, a spouter is a comparatively rare occurrence, though extremely copious when it does put in an appearance. The majority of Russian oil is therefore brought up by baling, and that the baler, a steel tube 20 to 30 feet long, may have a reasonable diameter, the well must be bored to a considerable size in its lowest depth, usually 800 feet. Water being present in the upper strata, the well sinker has to line his shaft throughout, and accordingly begins with an opening 28 to 30 inches across. As the drilling goes on, the tube lining is forced down under great pressure until it is deemed advisable to contract the bore. Then a tube of smaller diameter is passed through the first and sunk, and as this process is continued, the well lining resembles a huge telescope, one that will never be closed. The eye end, that is, the lowest tube, may be 8 inches to a foot across. The greatest calamity that can overtake the engineer is the snapping of his rope or rods, or perhaps something falls down the well and jams the borer against the steel lining. 6 months of hard and expensive labor, with a host of different tweezers, probes, cutters, hooks, attached to the end of hundreds of feet of rope, may be necessary for the removal of the obstruction. Fishing for the Atlantic cable was child's play in comparison with the rescue of a drill from the bottom of a quarter-mile of tubing. As soon as the clearing auger begins to bring up a slimy yellow sand, the engineer rejoices, for he knows that he has obtained his reward. The baler, furnished with a valve at the bottom, is fixed to the rope in place of the drill, and cautiously lowered, time after time, until nothing but pure oil comes up. Then the baling commences in real earnest, without any torpedoing, which would probably do more harm than good by driving great quantities of sand into the bore. Well digging is always a speculation, and deep is the joy of the prospector when by a good stroke of fortune his borer chances on a cavity where there is imprisoned a large volume of gas. A Russian spouter is a fine sight, rising 300 or 400 feet into the air, after very probably demolishing the derrick and its machinery. The proprietor cares nothing for this damage, as the fountain is pouring out in a minute, free of charge, as much petroleum as could be baled in a day. Such a spouter has been known to fling out 100,000 barrels in 24 hours, though of course the rate of flow rapidly diminishes after the first few days. The average life of a well is 5 years. In exceptional cases, however, oil is raised in commercial quantities for thrice that time. In 1899, the huge sum of 2,600,000 pounds was spent on boring alone, and the output of the Ashperon was 52 million barrels. It is noticeable that the depth of new wells increases from year to year. Owing to the copiousness of the Russian spouter, the engineer must be prepared with proper means for catching a sudden outflow, otherwise he may see a fortune running to waste under his very eyes. The oil, as fast as it rises, is caught in a sort of compound, whence it is carried by channels to the reservoirs, where the sand is allowed to settle before the liquid is let off through pipes to the refineries at Blacktown. With so much petroleum about, in the earth, on the earth, in the air, in everything, including food, it is not a matter for surprise that disastrous fires should occur, especially in hot weather, when a mere spark is dangerous. Sometimes an open, settling reservoir ignites, and then is seen a sight of unsurpassed grandeur, as a huge, inky cloud rolls its fat folds of smoke for miles over the landscape. Nothing can be done to quell such a conflagration. But when a spouter catches fire, a remedy is at hand. Scrap metal is collected from all quarters and heaped round the well mouth in the form of a crater. Then steam pipes are applied, and the base of the flame is blown high in the air, separated from its source of supply by a tract of unignited gas. At a favorable moment, the metal crater is thrust inward onto the orifice, and the flame immediately dies of starvation. In its natural state, petroleum is of so composite a character that it must be passed through the refinery and its various layers sorted out by the still. This is, in idea, a huge, closed, upright cylinder with a capacity of 10,000 to 40,000 gallons, heated by furnaces beneath and connected by pipes passing through cold water to the receptacles for catching the products of distillation. The first bodies to pass off from the crude oil are the very volatile gases, which are condensed back into naphtha and petrol. The still is then cooled and heated again, this time to a higher temperature, driving off the illuminating oils. Then follow in succession the thick lubricating oils, greases, such as Vaseline, and tar. Russian refiners often use, in the place of a single still heated to different temperatures, a series of smaller stills through which the crude oil slowly passes, giving off in each still the bodies volatilized by the temperature of that particular still, which is still not the same as that of the rest of the series. It is claimed for this principle that a great savings of time and fuel is effected, since there is no delay for cooling down or drawing the fires. American petroleum is much richer in the illuminating oils than is the Russian, and the latter is proportionately more fitted for use as liquid fuel after the volatile elements, which would be dangerous in a firebox, have been driven off by distillation. The heavy residuum, known as astakti, was for years found to be an encumbrance, as the Russian refiners were chiefly interested in producing lamp oil. But Mr. Nobel, a Swede, conceived the idea of utilizing the hitherto waste product by spraying or atomizing it with steam and introducing it in this state into a furnace. As a result, the astakti has become of great commercial value, raises practically all the steam power in South Russia on both land and river, and is being used in an increasing number of locomotive and marine fireboxes throughout the world, on account of the ease with which it can be stoked, its comparative cleanliness, and the convenience and economy attending its storage. The American has copied the Russian example with Texas fuel, which closely resembles the Caspian astakti. Texas petroleum is naturally rich in sulfur, which interferes with both storage and combustion. But a method of precipitating the sulfur economically has been discovered, and now Texas fuel is produced transcending the Russian article in its caloric qualities. Large quantities are stored at Thames Haven, whence they are distributed throughout the south of England, replacing the black diamond to no small extent. Dr. Boverton Redwood has calculated that the world's consumption of petroleum represents a continuous flow at the rate of 3 miles an hour through a 41-inch pipe, and that the storage of a year's supply would require for its accommodation a tank 929 feet high, long, and broad. The profitable distribution of such an immense quantity of liquid has taxed the ingenuity of those connected with the traffic. American practice establishes the refineries and reservoirs far from the oil fields, near the sea, so that after refining the oil may be shipped with little delay. But how to get the petroleum from well to refinery? Oil fields are generally in rough country, difficult of approach by rail or road. Wheeled transport was therefore found expensive, and gradually gave way to a system of transmission by pipeline from the wells to the seaports. Individual wells are connected by small pipes to the trunk lines, which are operated by companies. The proprietor of a well runs off from his own reservoirs, say 10,000 barrels, for which he obtains a receipt, negotiable like an ordinary check. There his part of the transaction ends. The Standard Oil Company, the largest of its kind, collects the products of the Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio fields into storage tanks at Olean, New York, about 75 miles from Buffalo, with an aggregate capacity of 9 million barrels. From this point starts the great trunk line, composed of 3 6-inch wrought iron pipes, which run for 400 miles to New York Harbor. There are 12 pumping stations on the line, spaced about 35 miles apart, to pass on the oil at a pressure of about 1,000 pounds to the square inch. In this manner, some 1.2 million gallons are transferred daily from Olean to the Atlantic seaboard, where they are converted by the refineries into burning and lubricating oils and stored in immense iron and steel tanks until required for shipment to foreign markets. The main pipeline is divided into divisions and sections, much like a trunk railway system, and has, similarly, its division superintendents and engineers, section foremen, line gangs and line walkers, telegraph stations, and daily reports. The system works quietly and smoothly, and as the pipes are buried underground from 1 to 2 feet and run through a sparsely settled country, the general public sees or hears but little of the system. Similar trunk lines extend from the Ohio fields to Chicago, and from West Virginia and Pennsylvania to Philadelphia and Baltimore. The Russians are slowly adopting the American plan of transport. Unfortunately for the Baku trade, the refineries had already been established on the Caspian, and to transfer the refining industry to the Black Sea would entail great loss to the proprietors of present installations. Also, the Black Sea-Caspian Railway could not spare the revenue derived from the carriage of petroleum on its tank cars. The stress of competition has, however, driven the oil merchants to the pipeline for part of the distance between Baku and Batumi. Already, an 8-inch line has been laid from Batumi to Mykolaiv, a station on the railway 140 miles from the Black Sea. For the remaining 420 miles, the tank cars are employed, but the shortening of the journey has greatly increased the amount transported daily. In time, the line will be completed and wheeled carriage be entirely obviated. Prior to 1886, all American oil imported into Great Britain came in barrels. Since that year, tank steamers have been introduced, generally in the petroleum carrying trade. These steamers contain from 6 to 10 double compartments, each holding from 85,000 gallons in the case of the smaller steamers to 250,000 gallons in steamers of the largest size. The tanks are separated from the engines and boilers by a safety well or empty space, which is sometimes filled with water, and the total cargo of oil in bulk carried in this manner is equivalent to 25,000 to 70,000 barrels. In addition to the 15 steamers which the Anglo-American Oil Company now possesses, it is building what will prove to be, when finished, the largest tank steamer in the world, with an oil capacity of 10,500 tons in bulk, or 73,500 barrels. On arriving at its journey's end, the petroleum is stored into great circular tanks at Purfleet, Birkenhead, Hull, Sunderland, Newcastle, Avonmouth, Plymouth, Belfast, and Dublin. The Purfleet installation covers 30 acres, on which rise many gasometer-shaped receptacles and mountainous piles of empty barrels. In all important towns are subsidiary storage depots, and the oil is conveyed to them by means of railway tank wagons consisting of a cylindrical boilerplate tank with a capacity of 3,000 gallons, placed horizontally on a flat carriage. From the 300 provincial depots, the oil is distributed in road tanks to the shopkeepers, from whom it finds its way to the consumer. Colonel Drake, drilling in the quiet Pennsylvania Valley in 1859, would have needed a more prophetic mind than that of Mother Shipton herself to foresee the benefits he was conferring on the world by laying the foundation of the mightiest trade development history has ever recorded, a development that in less than 40 years has embraced every corner of the globe and brought light and heat and comfort to hundreds of millions of human beings. It has been truly said that the discovery of gold in California was not so pregnant with the welfare of the human race, since gold concerns the few and light concerns us all. Also, that we accept as a matter of course the commoner facts of our existence, and rarely turn our thoughts to the ways and means by which our wants are satisfied. Quite a long chapter has been written on the antecedents of a plum pudding, the ingredients of which are the outcome of much labor working hand in hand with nature. And those who know can fashion quite an entertaining story to accompany the lighting of the family lamp, directing the listener's thoughts to the Norwegian forest whence came the wood for the match, to the Carolina cotton fields that contributed the material for the wick, to the Pennsylvanian and Russian oil fields where illuminant was won from the darkness of the nether earth, to the Bohemian glass works that fashioned the transparent tube which draws the flame into the bright radiance of perfect combustion. Mention has been made of the natural gas which aids the oil miner by driving the petroleum deposits to the surface. In some parts of America, notably Indiana and Ohio, it occurs in such volumes as to become a valuable commodity that can be turned to good account as a lighting and heating agent. An adit is bored into the subterranean gas cavities, and the issuing gas is collected from the various wells. If so, they may be called into central reservoirs for propulsion through trunk pipelines to distant centers of industry. One such line connects the Indiana wells, some 60 in number, with Chicago, 140 miles away. Compressors, which can be worked at a maximum pressure of 2,000 pounds per square inch, force the gas into the mains under a stress of 300 pounds. The mains are two 8-inch wrought iron pipes laid underground and connected at intervals by a bypass, which enables the contents of either to be switched into the other channel. At the Indiana boundary line, the pressure is stepped down to 40 pounds, and the diameter of the pipes increased to 10 inches, from which it issues on reaching the town at a 1-pound pressure into an extensive system of distributing mains ramifying throughout the streets. Pittsburgh is in like manner supplied from Ohio with a natural power which, even when conveyed from many miles to the consumer, still costs less than the same power produced on the spot. The utility of the gas may be estimated from the consumption, which in Chicago rises to several million cubic feet daily, while in Pittsburgh it has to a great extent ousted coal, though some of the most extensive coal fields of America are in the neighborhood of the town. In course of time, the natural gas supplies will be exhausted, and Pittsburghians will turn again to King Coal, if that monarch has not already been dethroned by the electricity from Niagara. End of chapter 18.